All right, hello and welcome to lecture 3, I think. So this one's going to be about assumptions, ethics, and piracy. Oh my. I think you've noticed by now that this class is like half philosophy and half programming. So welcome to another lecture in the philosophy half. All right, so let's get started with assumptions and arguments in general. So we're going to pick apart arguments in this class. People are going to come to us, or I guess virtually, on the internet. People are going to make some statements like this technology is good or it's bad for one reason or another, and we don't want to just blindly agree with them. We want to pick apart their arguments and try and understand what they're talking about and decide for ourselves if it's a good enough argument to believe. Okay, so we want to be able to critically assess an argument. So let's talk about some tools that we have at our disposal to do just that. Okay? And I guess the moral of this is you can't just disagree with somebody by saying, you're wrong, I hate you. You have to give what's known as a counter-argument to prove that you understand what they're talking about and there's something really wrong with their argument, not just that you hate them. Okay. So one thing that you can attack about an argument is its assumptions, and that's not too hard to explain, so that will be the topic of the next slide. So let's just get on the same page. I have 3 examples. The first one, I buy a birthday candle, happy birthday to me, and the manufacturer of the birthday candle is, I think, assuming that I'm not going to try and light it underwater, okay? Because obviously it won't work, and in that case, maybe I'll try and sue the manufacturer. But they're going to win because of this assumption, right? Any reasonable person would make it. Okay, example 2. I make a dinner reservation at a restaurant. Wouldn't that be nice these days? And so the assumption of the restaurant is, yeah, I'm totally going to show up on time, and he's going to give us some money, and we're going to give him some food. That's our social contract, and if I don't show up, I break that. I don't think they can sue me, but that's a bad thing to do, right? Socially not okay. So that's another assumption that people make, and every time you see something like a statement made by somebody, all the possible assumptions should be like churning in your mind, okay? Oops. So, third and funniest example, let's pretend that I support a ban on parakeets. For some reason I hate them. Maybe they're too loud or something. Running for office in the US. I go on a corner and I have a little sign and I wave it around and you see it. Okay, so potentially you have one of many assumptions. The first one, probably the most likely, is I have gone insane for some reason. Second possible option, I just don't like parakeets. They have burned me in the past, and I just don't want anything to do with them, especially in my government. And then the final option is, well, maybe something that could be in my mind is that I noticed that there's a law that doesn't specifically ban parakeets, so maybe that it allows them to actually run for office. So that's the most logical assumption, hopefully. That's what I thought. And you'd be thinking, well, obviously this must be the case, otherwise he wouldn't be wasting his time holding a sign about this topic. Okay, so those are one of many assumptions, and you should be thinking of all of them whenever you see an argument. Okay, so that's it's just what is being taken for granted. What am I not saying when I make these statements? Okay, what do you think I'm saying? That's the idea. Okay, and it looks like this thinks that I am typing in Spanish. Not this time. Alright, so here's an example I want you to pause the video and think about. So, Senator Franklin is a member of the Orange Party, which supports increased military spending by the federal government. And then the next sentence, this is all one big argument, surely Franklin will vote for a cut in spending on social programs. Okay, so take a second and figure out which is the best option in this case. Which assumption is this argument making? And assume that these are the only possible options, A through E. Okay, so take a second to think about that. And assuming you're back now, let's try and walk through it. So the idea is there are 2 statements being made, 1 and 2. And the assumption, or the idea is, of this argument is that 1 implies 2. Like, if 1 is true, then 2 must be true. Okay? They kind of follow from each other. 2 follows from 1. And so let's see which of these would explain 2 following from 1. Okay? So the first one is, well, option A. Elected officials always support policies endorsed by their parties. Okay? that's unfortunately quite general. This doesn't explain exactly what's going on here, because we don't know that military spending has anything to do with social programs right now. Okay? If A would be true, if this number 2 was saying something like elected officials, if 2 was saying something like Franklin will surely vote for a cut in increasing military spending. Okay? You see how this one does not imply 2 in this case. Okay? Let's come back to B, because that is, in fact, the right answer. But let's talk about C, D, and E. Okay? So C is Senator Franklin agrees with the policies of his party. Again, like A, there's no connection here. It's way too general. No connection linking 1 and 2, because the policies of his party only have to do with military spending as far as we know. Nothing to do with social programs. Okay? D is useless as well, because the Orange Party has majority in the Senate. Yeah, sure. If that says nothing about social programs. Again, there's no link between 1 and 2 still. Okay? If they have the majority in the Senate, maybe they can get a bill passed, but we don't know which bill yet. Okay? That's the wrong assumption still. It's not enough. And finally, E, Senator Franklin opposed federal spending on social programs. Now, this might seem like an answer. Like, yes, maybe he believes that, but there's no reason for us to have said 1 if E was the correct assumption. 1 makes no sense to explain. It should have just been 2 by itself in that case. So E is not the perfect answer here. Okay? And so finally, we come to B, and that is in fact the right answer. I'll circle in rainbow. It's the only one that links military spending and social programs. Okay? It's the only one that actually links 1 and 2. The only assumption that links. Okay. That is my best example, and hopefully it's all making some sense. All right, so now we're ready for ethics. That's going to be a very important topic in this class. It's going to be the topic of your next essay, in fact. So ethics is all about what it means to do the right thing. Okay? And I've talked about last lecture that there's no right answer to these ethical questions that I might pose to you. So if there is no right answer, then how in the world can we reason about anything? Okay, so the answer is I'm going to give you some viewpoints or ways to look at or approach a problem or an argument and decide yourself whether it's good, whether it's ethical. Okay? So I do want to say right now, ahead of time, before you start your next essay, that there really is no right answer. And I, instead, want you to argue your point well, okay? I don't care what you say, I just want to make sure that you actually back up what you're saying with logical things, okay? So, also, my opinions on topics don't matter at all, okay? You can argue whatever I say, you can argue the exact opposite of whatever I say. If I actually tell you what I believe, I'm going to try my best to be impartial. And as long as you argue your point well and don't leave any, holes in anything, holes in your arguments, you're going to get 100, okay? So that's the idea. And, yeah, I'll try and be as impartial as possible, but sometimes it's just so obvious what I think that I can't not tell you, okay? So that is my little disclaimer, but now we're ready. All right, let's get started with studying ethics. It's the study of doing the right thing. And there's a bunch of different viewpoints that we could take, a bunch of different people who thought things, and a bunch of other people that agreed with them. And so there's plenty of things that we could talk about, and if you like this topic, I encourage you to take a philosophy class. But we're going to talk about, we're going to hit these first two really hard. The first one is called a deontological theory, okay? Deontology is where this root comes from, and kind of sounds like at the beginning D something. It comes from the word duty. Okay, so no matter what in a deontological theory, the rules that the theory says to follow are completely absolute. They must always be followed. Okay, the word always is going to be very important here. So let me add it. The next kind of ethical theory that we'll look at in detail is utilitarianism, and you might have learned about this a little bit in maybe a history class. It's when you consider, or maybe even an economics class, it's when you consider the utility of your actions, and the utility is just some measure of how good it is. So like how much good can this action produce? How much happiness can this action produce? And good and happiness kind of come hand in hand. One could be the other. And then finally, something that you definitely learned about in history classes, but we won't get into really in this class, is your natural rights. There's a lot of people that believed in this kind of stuff, like maybe Locke and Hobbes, if you remember them, where the idea there is we have a bunch of fundamental rights, like God-given or just by virtue of being born, being humans, we have these rights and they cannot be taken away. Okay, that is like 3 major ethical theories, and you shouldn't believe any of them. Okay, you should always pick apart your argument. Okay, always think about each one of them as they apply to a specific topic, and maybe you can combine them, or maybe they all make sense, and you have to choose at the end of the day. Like, what do you do? The burden of choice is on you. Okay, so let's talk about Kantianism, which is a form of deontology. Okay, it's like the major one that you'd learn in a philosophy class. So in Kantianism, it was invented by this dude here named Immanuel Kant back in the day, and his beliefs, or deontology's beliefs in general, is if you have a rule, you got to follow it, always, no exceptions. Okay, so Kant's beliefs are these. There are a few different ways to frame them, but here are 2 ways. So the first possible way that you can talk about Kant's beliefs is you should always act in a way that you would want others to always act. There it is again. You get no special exceptions for yourself. So if you tell your child you can't have a cookie, you yourself cannot have a cookie. Okay, that would be hypocrisy. And the other way that you can frame Kant's beliefs, at least in terms of humanity, arguments about humanity, is you should never treat humans as a means to an end, like they're doing something for you and you only care about them for that reason. No, they're humans and you should treat them fairly. Okay? And so that is Kant's beliefs, and not too hard to explain, but very hard to argue about or get into details about. And so that you can have entire philosophy classes just about Kant if you really wanted to. And so there's one problem that's commonly talked about with Kant's viewpoint, is that he allows for no exceptions. Okay, it's got to be this way always. Deontology must always be followed. Okay. Before we get there, before we talk about one way that Kantianism breaks down, let's talk about all the different terms that you could use and create using Kant's name. So this will come in handy when you write your essay. So Kant by himself, it's a noun, it's the dude himself, that's the man who came up with this philosophy. Kantianism is his philosophy, okay? It is a Kantian philosophy. So Kantianism is what you call Kant's style of philosophy. And Kantian is an adjective, so like this argument is Kantian, this philosophy, this statement is Kantian, okay? It's an adjective. And this is the silly dictionary definition of that. And then Kantianist is another noun, and that's somebody who likes Kantianism. They support it. All right, so sorry for all of this. Now you know. So let's get to where Kantianism can break down. Okay, so Kant would hate lying because, obviously, you would always want someone else to tell you the truth, and so you must always yourself tell the truth. And should everyone always lie would be the question that Kant asks to figure out whether or not this is a good idea. And his answer is a resounding no. So this sometimes breaks down, and here's one way. Here I am in my house. I'm going to draw a house. and I don't know, here's the front door, and here is some kind of murderer come into my house, and here I am in my room or something, and so the murderer knocks on the door and says to my mom or somebody that I'm here to kill Lawton. Where is he? And so the idea is, well, in theory, it would be a good idea to lie here, but Kantianism says no. So this is a good example of it. It doesn't really break down, but it might, or it might not. So if my mom says, oh, he's at school, he's not here right now, so, and then the murderer goes away, that would be a good lie in this case, yes? But there is a case where actually lying will still kill me. Okay, so maybe my mom lies in this case. So this is an argument for Kantianism now. Maybe my mom says, he's outside. But me, unbeknownst to both of them, I overhear this conversation at the front door, and I run out the back door. So now I'm outside, and my mom who lied now killed me because the murderer is going to come around to the back now. Okay? So there are cases where Kantianism works and doesn't work, and here's a nice little thought experiment for you. Okay, so that is Kantianism in a nutshell. Let's talk about utilitarianism now. And so utilitarianism is about utility. It focuses on the consequences of any actions. It was popularized by a few people, one of which, probably the most famous, is John Stuart Mill. Again, these people just look like philosophers. All right, so focus on the consequences of your actions, and there needs to be some kind of measure of utility. So we're going to measure in terms of the good that it produces, maybe happiness or pleasure. Those are two definitions of good, okay? So there's always going to be some way to measure these things, and then you're going to base your decision on that, on which side has the highest utility. Okay, so in essence, you try and produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. And again, it breaks down because it's really hard to measure these things a lot of the time. Like, okay, how good is this going to be for everybody in the world always? That's interesting to think about. And then also, the rights of individuals don't matter at all in utilitarianism, and you might be opposed to that. So, like, if it's for the greatest good, we're going with it, even if it hurts somebody personally. Okay? So the standard idea, or the standard argument for utilitarianism, or the standard example of it, is you're put in a situation where you have to kill one person to save like 50 of them. Okay? So don't use my example, or don't use my arguments too heavily on your first mini essay, but think about this. This is going to get you thinking. So from a utilitarian point of view, what's the best thing? What produces the greatest good? So you have options. So the first thing that you can think about if you're trying to weigh your options is, oh yeah, 50 is greater than 1. Let's save the 50 people. Obviously, if I'm put in this situation, I'm definitely going to save those 50 people. Okay, I have no choice but to kill 50 people or one person. I'm killing the one. Or, alternatively, and this is why it's really hard to judge utility, or alternatively, you have this other option. You can't tell what's always the case. It's a case-by-case basis. So what if that one person was like just about to cure cancer? So in that case, you're going to want to kill the 50, aren't you? Because that one person living and curing cancer is going to save millions, billions of people, right? Oh man, this is difficult. It is an ethical dilemma. Okay, so this is why it's philosophy. There's no right answer. But these points of view are things that I want you to keep with you forever, and they're ways to approach a problem and to figure out, is this a good one? Should I believe it as well as these other people who are trying to convince me of it? Okay, so don't just look at a problem and make a decision, pick it apart. All right, so here is my silly example for ethical theories. Now, let's talk about the ethics of Pokemon. And since we're not in class, I can't put you in groups to have debates, so I'm going to be arguing with myself, but that's okay. So let's determine what Kant and Mill might think about the world of Pokemon, and in specific, like Pokemon themselves and what we do with them in that world. All right. So sorry if you don't know about Pokemon. Now it's time. All right. So in the world of Pokemon, you can catch them and make them fight other Pokemon to train them and become like the Pokemon master. That's Pokemon in a nutshell. Sorry if this is new to you. So Kant, if we think about him, he would ask questions about like, okay, should we always domesticate wild Pokemon? Is this a good idea? And so Kant is for individual rights, so he would probably say no in this case. Pokemon should be free. I wouldn't want to be myself domesticated, so obviously we should not do this. We should not always do this. Okay, so in that case, Kant would never be a Pokemon trainer. Okay, he would hate that. He would protest against it. All right, but that's one argument that Kant might make. There are others. So will they always, if they're always domesticated, if we domesticate every single Pokemon in the world, will they have a better life in that case? So this is also a utilitarian thing, because I say the word better. But let's think about it from Kant's point of view. And so we're thinking about it from the point of view of the word all here. So again, there's pros and cons. So in terms of pros, well, one is animals in captivity might live longer, and they do in our world. Maybe they do in the Pokemon world. So that's an argument for domesticating every Pokemon. The con, though, is, and this goes back to this idea of individual rights, that they won't be as free. So that's something that Kant will have to weigh. And so remember that Kant is all about the word always. Think that. All. Always. Things like that. And then a final pro in this for this question is, well, Pokemon can technically get to a higher level than they would ever be in the wild, because we can like level them up to level 100, and maybe that makes them better, healthier, who knows. So that's another pro. And then Kant would have to go off and think about all these things, like what's the right answer. So this is why it's ways to approach a problem. It's not ways to find the answer, because you still have to weigh everything. Okay? All right, another question that Kant might ask is, should we always use Pokemon to further our dream of catching them all, right? Should we do that? Should we force Pokemon to fight for us? And Kant would say, absolutely not. No way, dude. That means we're using them as a means to an end. Technically, Kant is talking about humans in this case, but I'm going to apply it to Pokemon, because they are intelligent creatures, right? So that is one case where I think that Kant would always think no, but you can argue against me. You can find another viewpoint that Kant might take. This is how philosophy works. Then finally, should we work to get rid of Team Rocket? They're like a terrorist group in the world of Pokemon. And then Kant would probably ask like a follow-up question, well, should we always try and prevent these harmful things that exist in the world? Yes, so we should probably work on getting rid of Team Rocket. And if that involves using Pokemon, oh, now we have another dilemma. We might have to domesticate some of them. Okay? So you can go back and forth with all these ideas. They all bounce back between each other. And you can come up with your own decisions. So that's what Kant might think in the Pokemon world. And now let's talk about what Mill might think. So it's always about utility. What's gained, okay? So what do we gain from owning Pokemon, and what do they lose? Okay, and this is the trade-off. That's how we determine utility. So a con would be they're less free right now if we go and catch them, and that would decrease their utility. Maybe they want to be free out in the wild. Pikachu didn't like his Pokeball, right? And then a pro would be, well, technically if we owned a Pokemon, we would allow them to level up faster, and once we beat all these gym leaders, we would rise up in status, and then so would they. So that might be good for both of us. They gain notoriety, and maybe they'll be treated better, like pampered at a Pokemon resort or something. So again, you have to weigh things, cons and pros, every time. Doesn't matter what Mill, there's no cut and dried answer as to what Mill might think. That's the idea. Okay? So yeah, just make sure to weigh everything. And another question that Mill might ask is leveling up a Pokemon always a good thing? Like, is it a, sorry, not the word always. Is it a good thing? That's the word we want to focus on in terms of utilitarianism. A pro might be, okay, if we level up a Pokemon, that's probably making them healthier, right? They're stronger now. It's good to work out, right? And then a con would be, in order to do that, Pokemon have to fight each other. Oh no. Should we be doing that? And then we have to think about whether or not that's good for us, for the Pokemon, determine the total utility, and go back and forth. Okay? So that is what you could think about for a silly topic even. And hopefully that helps ingrain the ideas of deontology and utilitarianism in your minds. So with that, let's apply these concepts to a real thing, a real computer science thing, piracy, and to go along with it, intellectual property. Okay, so here are some questions that I will try and answer for you. We're going to talk about the history of piracy on the internet. Why in the world is it so hard to stop it? Why does it keep happening if it's supposedly such a bad thing? And then how do our ethical theories that we've learned about now apply to piracy on the internet? Okay, so in order to talk about piracy, we need to talk about intellectual property, which is just a fancy word that describes something that is made, something that someone else makes. It's a creative work that is not touchable. It's a thought. It's like a little thought bubble cloud. You cannot touch intellectual property. Okay, these are things like copyrights, patents, trademarks, trade secrets, and then something that you can kind of touch sometimes, depending on how you get it, software and music. Okay, so this is a great question now. If it's not physical, if it's not something that you can touch, what does it mean to go and steal it? And then the follow-up question is, should stealing and copying this intellectual property thing be treated the same as stealing something? Because that's what we think about it as. Is it really the case? So in normal, real life, like you go rob a bank, you have your bag of money. It previously existed in the bank, and now you're taking it away from the bank, and now it exists in your house. Okay? This is like the bank. Okay? The money's gone, the bank can't use it anymore. But when you have something that's intellectual property, like a song that you download, for example, you still have it. The original owner still has it. You made a copy of it. There's nothing, no one's losing anything is the idea. And so it's a bit different. And the joke is like, you wouldn't download a car, would you? And the joke follow-up would be, I would if I could. Okay, so that's intellectual property. Let's talk about how things have been stolen in the past and how they are being stolen today. Excuse me. So back in the day, there was this thing called Napster. You might have heard about it. It was like the original file sharing service. Okay, it was one of the most popular ones originally. Okay, and so what happened was you connected to the internet, like you were on the internet, and you connected to Napster. But Napster wasn't just one place. It wasn't like one website. It was a network. It was a network of a bunch of other computers who were themselves running the Napster program. Okay? This is just one big network. It's called a peer-to-peer network. Okay? So, one individual person could share what was on their personal hard drive with other people. So this is like what was on... this is a search. Never mind. So if you wanted something on your hard drive, you had to download it, and you can download it from another person. So you can search for what you want in a search bar, and then it goes and asks everyone in the network, hey, do you have this thing? Does it match the query? And then after that, you can start downloading it from somebody else. Okay, and this is how you could copy it from somebody else, and this is called peer-to-peer, because you're going between people. Peer-to-peer file sharing. Because you're going between individual people that have this on their own computer. Okay? So that was the granddaddy, that was the original thing, and they got sued because they are not fighting hard enough to like tackle this intellectual property problem, and these rights owners don't want this stuff shared, and Napster was letting it be shared, and so they got shut down in 2001, which makes me feel old because several of you were probably born during or before or after 2001, right? So that was Napster. Okay, the next thing that was popular was essentially a clone of Napster called Limewire, and let's get rid of that. What it was just another file sharing service. Again, you're connecting to a network with people sharing their things, and you can search for them, and you can download them onto your own computer, and you can share what you have with people. Okay, and the funniest example of this is Limewire came in two versions, a free version and a pro version that you could buy, and you could actually use Limewire, the free version, to steal Limewire, the pro version, which is hilarious in my mind. So that's a fun little anecdote. So that was Limewire. They got sued again because they're not like cooperating with all these people who own intellectual property that they don't want downloaded. So they got sued and they got shut down in 2010. Okay, so just 9 years after Napster got shut down. And yes, the irony with Limewire Pro. That's hilarious. All right, so let's talk about what Kant and Mill might think about this stuff. So Kant would say, he would ask, should you always be able to share content with people? And this content, remember, it would otherwise cost you money. So you have options again, pros and cons. What might Kant think? Obviously, he's not alive today to tell us, but we can use his framework to determine the steps that he might take in trying to make sense of this. Okay? So, on one hand, Kant might say, yes, nothing should have been copyrighted in the first place. Everyone should always have access to everything because that advances the world as we know it. If we lock stuff up, we will just be back in the Middle Ages. We don't like that. So maybe Kant would be of the opinion that everything should be free. Yeah, he's a socialist. So that was one point of view that he might take. But then he might also think, let me think about this from the point of view of the artist. If I was an artist, I would not want to have my content stolen, and that would hurt my livelihood, for example. I would make less money. So I wouldn't want to have a special case for nobody takes my stuff, but I can take everyone else's. So I would have to say no in that case. Okay, so those are the two ways that Kant might tackle this problem. And obviously there are plenty more. I encourage you to think of some. Sorry there, I had to fix the Mill slide, the Mill part. So Mill would ask things like, what makes the most people happy? What provides the most utility? And we can think about this from 2 points of view again. You could use Mill's thoughts to argue, yes, we should have piracy. No, we should not. So pro would be something like millions of people who can't afford an album, like say this is some kind of music that we're stealing. Plenty of people are going to steal the album because maybe they can't afford it, or they can't buy it in their own country. They're now able to enjoy it, so that increases utility. And those who can pay it might actually, who can't afford it, maybe just wanted to try out the album, see if it's any good, and then they'll buy it. So these are some pros from Mill's point of view. People want options. Cons, though, would be something like the artist who made this album might lose so much money that they can't make any more music, and and this is saying the same thing twice, sorry. And that would decrease a whole lot of people's utility because maybe it's a very popular artist. Okay, so that might make a lot of people sad, and so you'll have to weigh these two options again. Okay, and so you can actually use, like I showed here, Kantianism and utilitarianism to argue both sides. It's really odd, but you can. Okay, so that brings us to the present day. There's something called BitTorrent. BitTorrent is the most recent of these things, of these ways to share files, and it's something that's very hard to get rid of because unlike Limewire and Napster, where you actually did have to kind of connect to some central place to find these files, you don't have to do that anymore for BitTorrent. And also, BitTorrent itself can be used well, I guess just like Napster and Limewire could be used, it could be used for things that aren't stealing. Like this example here is a free operating system. And I guess the real difference is people are actually using BitTorrent for things other than stealing like this. This is actually a very useful thing. If you want to download a Linux image, it's a lot faster to use BitTorrent a lot of the time. So, yeah, it's just a file sharing protocol. It's a way of transferring information from one person to another and making a download fast. So there are the ways that you use to search for things that you can steal on BitTorrent. That's always through some website, and those get shut down or moved across country borders, things like that. So plenty of websites that you can search for the things that you want to download can get shut down. But that just makes 2 more pop up. Okay? That's the idea. So BitTorrent is kind of hard to get rid of, and it is the culmination of all of these problems. Okay? That is BitTorrent in a nutshell, and people actually use it for non-piracy things. So finally, to wrap up this lecture, I want to talk about piracy that you know quite well. Okay? So something that applies to you very well this semester in your college career: should you download textbooks without paying for them? Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's have an argument. Obviously, I would want to have a heated debate in class, but we unfortunately can't do that right now. I will look forward to it in a future semester. Okay, so we need to think of, and I encourage you to pause the video and think of what I put on the next slide. What might I say? Like, what are some common arguments for and against piracy in terms of textbooks? What are the assumptions of the people who make those arguments, and what would our boys say about this? Okay, so that is where I want to leave you, and then we'll go to your writing assignment and then get out of here. So let us talk about this now. We've got some arguments for and against. Here are the ones that I thought of. I'm sure there's plenty more. The first one is, well, it's okay to steal a textbook because the publisher is charging way too much money, and I'm sure many of us believe this. If a textbook is $200, that just seems wrong, right? So that's like that's an argument to, it's an appeal to emotion, right? An appeal to your credit card. So the assumption there is, with this argument, is that the publisher actually has control over the price, and they're going and extorting you. They're charging more than they should. But sometimes this actually isn't true, and you can't make this argument when the book costs something like $40. Maybe that's probably just the price of printing it with color. Okay, so that's an argument for and a counterexample, a counter-argument. Let's put that there. Okay, an argument against is, no, you should never do this to textbooks. You should never steal them because the authors of the book worked hard. They should be rewarded for all the time they put into this book. We're using it in our class, and it's going to help us. And so the assumption there is that the authors actually did a good job writing the book. And I'm sure you've read a few textbooks where this is not the case. Okay? So not only is this expensive, but you're not really gaining much. Just you have to buy it so that you can work on the problems. Okay? So that's one assumption. And again, another counter-argument here. A reason why this doesn't always work, this argument, is that maybe the book doesn't actually help you. You don't like what the authors made for you, okay? What they did, what they made, what they wrote. Okay? So maybe it's not helping you. You're just forced to buy it, and that's silly. Okay? So that is an argument against and a counter-argument. So you can go back and forth. This is how debates work. This is how philosophy works. There is no right answer. You have to decide yourself and, I guess, convince other people. So, all right, let's talk about Kant and Mill now. What would they think about this? Kant would ask something like, should we always steal a textbook? There's the word. Can't forget about it, always. And then Mill would ask, is this a good thing? All right, let's start with Kant. So on one side, Kant would be like, yes, knowledge should always be free. If we get rid of open things, or if we allow knowledge to be open and free, more people would become educated, and that's, in Kant's mind, maybe a good thing. Okay? So, yes, we should always make things free. In a perfect world, the authors of the textbook would just be paid from the government or something. We'd all have universal basic income or something like that. And on the other hand, Kant, maybe you could argue that Kant would say no to this question by saying that this hurts the authors and isn't fair. Like, you wouldn't want if you were the author of a textbook, you wouldn't want it to be stolen, because then you lose money, you lose your livelihood, right? Maybe you were hoping to live off of this textbook or something like that. Okay, so those are two arguments, yes and no, for Kant. And now let's talk about Mill. Mill would ask, well, all right, is this at all a good thing? What is the utility of stealing a textbook? And so, again, there are two ways to frame it. Maybe Mill might think, yes, it saves money and increases utility because people get to spend their money on other things, and that will make them happier. And the authors are only a couple people. The stealers far outnumber the authors, right? Every time, like, there's what, at most, I don't know. I don't think I've seen a textbook with more than like 4 authors. So if 5 people go and steal it, then automatically there's more utility there. Yes? And then on the other hand, no, it hurts the authors, and that maybe is the bulk of the utility, because maybe the authors won't write any more books. Maybe the book was really a good one, and we wanted the authors to keep writing, and they needed to be rewarded and paid for that in order to actually write well. Otherwise, they have to go get a day job or something. Okay, so those are arguments for and against, and then Kant and Mill's arguments for and against, perhaps. So there's just a bunch of different ways to frame things, and hopefully you're getting an idea of how to think like this, because now we come to your writing assignment. I'm going to force you to think like this. Okay, so let's go there. It's on Canvas in week 2. It's called, it's this essay right here, College is Useless. So if you click on that, you'll go here. Let me make it large. So this is going to be a 750-word essay. So after this one, you have now written 1,000 words, and you only have 5,000 left. I did not make up the word limit. I promise you that. Okay, so what I want you to do in this essay is argue this prompt. College is useless and it's not worth going to. Okay, obviously you're here right now, so you probably don't agree, but you have to argue this. Okay, you cannot say you disagree. You have to argue in some way that college is useless and it's not worth going to, and you got to back it up. Okay, so you can write however you want. But the one thing that I'm going to force you to include in this essay for credit is you must mention both the Kantian and the utilitarian viewpoints somewhere in the essay, and you must explain why Kant and Mill would take those viewpoints. Okay, you have to prove to me that you understand Kantianism and utilitarianism. You can't just say, oh yeah, Kant will say no. You have to say, Kant will say no because. Okay, that's the idea. There's no requirement to cite anything for this essay, but there will be in the future. As far as style goes, I have no concerns, no worries about how you format your essay. You can do it however you want, as long as I can read and understand it. And if you include any citations, I want to understand those. But as long as it's legible, you're good to go. Yeah, there's no citation requirement, but you might cite things if you want to. If you want to challenge, you can use this thing called LaTeX. It is a programming language for writing essays. It's very interesting. And if you're a math major, you'll have to eventually learn it. So maybe you want to get started with that. Yeah, so just upload your essay as a PDF or paste it in the text box. And here is the rubric. One thing that I want to point out is that I'm going to grade you on style, clarity, and readability, because this is an essay, of course. One thing that I really don't like in formal essays is contraction. So I'm telling you right now, if you include a contraction, you're going to get marked down. Okay? So watch out for that. And yeah, that's really all I care about. If you put in the word count, follow the prompt, you'll get full credit. Okay? That's the idea. So good luck with that, and let me know if you have any questions at all. This will be due on February 2nd. Okay? So yeah, I think that's all I have to say, and I will see you in the programming lecture for this week.